included nearly $1.2 billion in plus-up payments as more 2020 tax returns are processed.
The plus-up.
Folks, we have a ton of news about the fourth stimulus check, Social Security benefits, SSDI and SSDI. Now it's official, Joe Biden is ready to pass a new bill as the crisis continues to affect the millions of seniors and retirees financially. The president is pushing a new plan that will help those struggling the most, folks, and including this proposal is a rebate to Americans that are recipients of Medicare. So if you're a recipient of Medicare, be sure to continue watching this video. You don't want to miss out on it. Medicare is the federal health care insurance program for folks who are 65 and older, as well as individuals with disabilities. It has the high cost sharing, including deductibles and copays. But the so-called Medicaid cliff is a big issue for millions of seniors that is, whose incomes put them above the poverty line. And while other federal programs taper off on a sliding scale, Medicaid cuts off recipients with incomes that are even slightly above the poverty line. This means they are much less likely to go into the doctor or fill the prescription medicines. And the president is now trying to pass a new Medicare reform. Joe Biden said his administration was focused intensely on lowering healthcare costs and criticized the Republicans who he said are intent on dialing back Medicare coverage for the millions of people. Now, Biden has so far vowed to protect Medicare, vowed to protect Social Security, while touting his administration's successful efforts to pass and press pharmaceutical companies to lower the cost of insulin for Americans that are suffering from diabetes. The White House thinks it has a winning message in showcasing a bill that passed last year and that's expected to save taxpayers billions of dollars and lower the cost of prescriptions for the roughly 84 million Americans who rely on it. Biden talked up about how his administration is rolling out several parts of that law, passed in a Democratic-controlled Congress last year. The cap is already in the price of insulin and allows the federal government to negotiate deals on a handful of pharmaceutical prescriptions for Medicare enrollees, that is. The federal government expects to see significant savings from these negotiations and to make money from a rule that requires prescription makers to send Medicare a check when they raise prices higher than inflation. And already the legislation caps the price of insulin at $35 for disabled and older Americans who rely on the Medicare. Biden has proposed extending that cap to all Americans, but the plan faces an uphill battle. Efforts to pass laws capping the price of insulin for insured Americans or uninsured people or those with private insurance, and they failed in Democratic-controlled Congress last year. Another part of the law that the administration hopes will have ripple effects for Americans is the requirement for the pharmaceutical companies to pay a rebate to Medicare when they raise the cost of prescriptions faster than inflation. Now the EPA also has unveiled a pair of proposals to dramatically cut carbon emissions and spur the industry toward full electrification. The first of the proposed standards would target emissions from passenger cars, vans, and light trucks, while the second batch would apply to heavier-duty vehicles, such as delivery trucks, dump trucks, and buses. The EPA estimates that if finalized, the rules will lead to the electrification of 2/3 of new sedans, as well as 50% of heavier trucks by 2032.
Well, everyone here at the Morgan Hill Senior Center welcome the Social Security boost, but also point out they've been around long enough to keep it all in perspective.
How's everybody doing this morning?
The 85 seniors who show up almost daily here inside the city's Centennial Rec Center were dressed in pink today to boost awareness about breast cancer. The Senior Center is a place to connect and socialize, but also a place to cut costs. And for those on a fixed income, that's key, especially with the price of food skyrocketing.
We have a ton of news about the fourth stimulus check, Social Security benefits, SSI and SSDI. There's a ton of information on this video that you have to watch because there's a stimulus payment that you need to know. Exciting news, a few more states have announced brand new plans that will just provide extra stimulus aid to low income and households during this winter time. There are over 9 new batches of stimulus payments that are actually set to go out to everybody to the many Americans in need of stimulus payments. So, as inflation continues to impact the United States, well, many new proposals are finally beginning to be signed into law. Anyone living in these 6 states may be receiving some extra cash sometime next year. Many of these payments are part of programs that start in 2022, but will not fully wrap up until 2023. Certain requirements will have to be met in order to receive these checks, such as filing a tax at a time, and some of these benefits may not be delivered to recipients until 2023. New Jersey homeowners are set to receive some extra cash soon, and the amount that New Jersey homeowners receive just depends on how much money you make. So with those making less than $150,000 a year, you'll receive a $1,500 stimulus check in the mailbox. Renters will also be getting a rebate though they need to be making less than $150,000 annually even to get this check. Roughly 2 million residents will qualify for these rebates, which are scheduled to be paid by recipients on May 2023. The Golden State stimulus payment has already been given to many Californians, though roughly 5% of recipients are still waiting. The final wave of direct deposits and state-issued debit cards are also set to be sent to you by the end of next month. So many residents of Colorado have already received their payments before September, though anybody who has filed an extension will have their payment delivered to them by January 31st in the new year. The payment will be worth either $750 or for about $1,500 for the joint filers. States like Idaho, South Carolina, and even Pennsylvania have also agreed to provide relief checks and payments to help residents that are experiencing financial hardships due to the crisis, as rising prices continue to weigh on households all across the country. Families are feeling stretched too thin, and according to a monthly data report, as of December, 63% of Americans are still living paycheck to paycheck. It means everybody is that although consumer prices again rose, real average hourly earnings are down again 2% from a year earlier. It leaves many Americans in a bind as inflation, higher prices, force more people to dip into their cash reserves or lean on credit cards just when interest rates are at its peak. Already, credit card balances are surging, up to 15% in the most recent quarter, the largest annual bump in more than 20 years. At the same time, credit card rates are now more than 20% on average. It's an all-time high. It's still rising, folks. And compared with a year ago, 32% of all consumers are saving less than they were before. Among those who said they were struggling financially, half are unable to save and have no savings at all. A separate survey even found that a third of working adults feel somewhat very uncomfortable about their ability to pay an emergency suffering $400 expense. And the most recent data shows that inflation has been slowing for 5 straight months and is down from this year's peak of 9%. Energy prices in particular are down. It's cheaper to buy gas today than it was a year ago. But the Fed announced it would hike interest rates again, another 0.5 percentage point, folks, and that's something that we don't want to see, because inflation needs to be tamed until it falls under 2%. That means that Fed is still rooting for somewhat higher unemployment rates and slowing the economy. Jerome Powell also made clear that more interest rate hikes are on the way, just as 2023 is beginning to happen. But this only means one thing: stimulus payments are necessary, and stimulus checks should be sent out before the end of the year.
How is it in a functional process to drop a 4,100-page bill this morning, expect to vote on it tomorrow, and most of Congress hasn't had a chance to review this?
Look, the bill has been carefully worked on by the Appropriations Committee for a very, very long time. Most of the provisions of the bill were well known weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. And getting this bill done for the American people, which really matters, is the most important thing. Yes.
Did Democrats miss an opportunity to deal with the debt ceiling in the lame duck while